Since we don't have any children, all of my husband's $80 million inheritance and his house belong to me, his wife. That's what my sister-in-law blurted out. I'm Anne, a 45-year-old part-time worker. I've been blessed with 2 sons of grade 10th and 12th. My eldest son, who dreams to become a lawyer, is currently studying hard for this year's university entrance exams. Since he was little, he wanted to become a lawyer. I'm sure he was influenced by my brother Matt. My brother, a lawyer, achieved his long-held dreams of opening his own law firm a few years ago, and now employs several lawyers. Since my eldest son watched his uncle from a young age, he was always into studying and consistently performed well on his exam scores. When my brother found out that my eldest son's dream is to become a lawyer, he was delighted and has been very supportive. Whenever my eldest son sees his uncle, he would say, "One day, I'll become a respectable lawyer just like you." And my brother responded with a smile, "Hurry up and make your dream come true, and take over my seat." My brother didn't have children, therefore he always played with my sons whenever he visited our home, so they really admired him. He has a wife 10 years younger, but she never visited our home, and she seemed like an odd person. Since we have lost our parents at an early age, my brother was like a parent for me until I got married. My husband and I used to tease my brother about his young wife, but when I met her, I was shocked by her stubborn attitude. Despite she would be marrying my brother soon, she wasn't smiling at all and glared at us with a displeased look. Still, in front of my brother and his fiancée, I kept up the cheerful front and made comments like, "You two make a good match." But once I back home alone with my husband, I couldn't help expressing my true feelings. Why does she have such a displeased look on her face when she is getting married? My husband, who seemed to share my thoughts, replied worriedly, "She didn't seem like a very pleasant person, did she?" But there was nothing we could do about our concerns, and soon after, my brother got married to his fiancée. We, as a couple, took our children to my brother's house to celebrate, which he bought before he got married. It was a very nice house which suited my brother who was running a law firm. But we were surprised that we couldn't find any sign of my new sister-in-law. So my husband jokingly asked my brother, "Hey bro, are you already living separately from your wife?" Of course it was a joke, but my brother's face got fierce immediately, and we were taken aback. According to my brother, she often runs back to her parents' house at the slightest disagreement, and even knowing that we were coming today, she had gone to celebrate her mother's birthday overnight. As my husband felt bad about his inappropriate comment, my brother started speaking to us with a serious expression. "If we can't have children, would it be possible to let us adopt one of your kids?" I was taken aback that he could suggest such a thing so soon after getting married, but his expression seemed serious. The conversation came out of the blue and left me speechless, but my husband laughing responded, "If you're okay with one of our kids, feel free to choose whoever you want." Well, no one knows what the future holds, so let's talk about it when the time comes. I was worried about the adoption issue, but I was concerned about whether my brother's marriage was going well. My husband didn't seem to take it too seriously and brush it off. I know it's out of my business to interfere in their marriage issues, but I can't shake off this uneasy feeling. Since then, my family visited my brother's house occasionally, and my brother came over to our place, but we never saw my sister-in-law. My brother didn't talk about her, so I tried to avoid asking about her. 10 years after their marriage, and almost forgetting about her existence, my eldest son was entered to law school, starting from this year. My brother came to our house to celebrate my son's success, but instead of focusing on congratulating him, he brought up the adoption talk again. As I have mentioned before, could we adopt one of your children? It seemed that My brother and his wife still didn't have any children, and he was seriously considering adoption again. The last time he brought it up, it was soon after he got married, and he didn't seem too worried. But this time, he was serious. But my husband didn't seem to take it too seriously and replied immediately, "In that case, wouldn't our eldest son be the best choice? He dreams of becoming a lawyer after all." My husband said it so casually, that it's a major decision that could affect our children's lives. So I was more cautious. Even though one of them is going to be adopted, he is going to my brother's house where our uncle lives, so I don't think he will feel too anxious. What concerns me is the existence of my sister-in-law. I was worried that my sister-in-law might find it unpleasant that the boys are not her own. So I decided to ask my brother about it directly. "Does your wife agree with taking in the boys?" Then he responded with an adoring smile. "Don't worry about her. We've already discussed it." Even though I felt relieved by his words, I couldn't make a decision right away, so I decided to discuss it with my sons first. They are both in high school now, so I wanted them to decide their own future. No further discussions took place that day, but a few days later I received a call from my brother's law firm saying that he had collapsed. I rushed to the hospital where they had taken my brother, and there I found a worried-looking staff in his law firm. He had collapsed at work. He had been diagnosed with a stroke and was unconscious. With my arrival, the staff of the law firm left, but they told me that they still couldn't get in touch with my sister-in-law. I didn't know her cell phone number, so I tried calling her at home, but she never answered the phone. Even after my husband and sons arrived at the hospital, we still couldn't reach her. Then my younger son, who found my brother's smartphone among his belongings, managed to unlock it after a few trials and errors, and found her number. When I called the number which we finally found, she answered the phone with an angry voice. "Stop calling me, I see you next time." I was afraid of her who screamed with such tremendous force, but I started talking timidly. "Hello, it's been a while. I'm Anne, Matt's sister. Is this your cell phone? My brother has collapsed and is currently in the hospital." Right after she found out the call was from me, she immediately responded in a gentle voice. "I thought it was Matt. I'm sorry. But is it true that he has collapsed?" When I explained my brother's condition and the hospital he was taken to, she responded with a strangely cheerful voice. "I see. I have things to do so I can go to the hospital. So please contact me immediately if anything happens." Then she hung up the phone. I couldn't help but wonder if there was something more important than her husband's collapse. Eventually, I realized that I couldn't rely on her, so my family decided to take care of my brother. My eldest son, who has finished his university entrance exams and had free times, came to the hospital almost every day on behalf of me. Even though my brother remained unconscious and in critical condition, my sister-in-law never showed up at the hospital, and she never called us. So, a week after my brother's hospitalization, I decided to call her again. She picked up the phone immediately and shouted with a happy tone, "What happened? Did he pass away?" I wanted to scream back at her for her extremely disrespectful words, but I held back and answered, "He's still alive. More importantly, why aren't you coming to the hospital?" Then she responded, getting on my feeling of holding back my anger. "I'm not a doctor or priest. It won't change anything if I come to see him." I couldn't stand her, who responded in such an irrespective manner, and I hung up the phone. Perhaps the reason my brother wanted to adopt one of my sons was because he had given up on having a child due to the deterioration of his relationship with her. When my brother's marriage was decided, I heard that the two of them had met through a dating app. Perhaps the reason my sister-in-law married my brother was because she thought she could live a good life because he was a lawyer. As I thought about it, I became more and more angry. But when I consulted with my husband, he told me an even worse story. If your brother passes away like this, all of his inheritance will go to that wife. It occurred to me that the reason my brother, who had come to celebrate my eldest son's passing, I finally found out the reason why he talked about adoption again. It was probably because he was considering his inheritance. I regretted that I didn't decide on the adoption then, even though it's too late now. After my brother left, I casually brought up the topic of adoption with my sons. Unexpectedly, my second son volunteered to be adopted. Unlike his older brother, he didn't have any clear goals in life and seemed to think that life would be easier if he became my brother's adopted child. I assumed that my older son, who admired my brother, would want to be adopted, but I got a surprising response instead. I don't want to be adopted. I have to take care of Dad and Mom as the eldest son. I was delighted to hear his words, but I thought that he, who dreams to become a lawyer, might be suitable to be my brother's adopted son. My brother, who was unconscious, I felt helpless as I couldn't proceed with the adoption procedures on his behalf. It wasn't that I wanted my brother's inheritance, but I didn't want to give a single penny of his inheritance to my sister-in-law, who seemed to be urgently waiting for my brother's death. All I could do was hope for my brother's recovery. When his condition didn't improve, a few days later, he passed away. Despite not wanting to, I reluctantly called my sister-in-law. My brother passed away a while ago. Is it okay if we arrange a funeral? She, who was probably urgently awaiting news of her husband's death, responded in a cheerful voice. Oh, please handle everything. I can't be bothered with greetings or anything. And you don't have to make me the chief mourner. How could you? As I was about to lose my temper, she hung up the phone. In the end, my husband and I organized my brother's funeral. The people from my brother's law firm also helped us out a lot. Although my husband was worried about the law firm, my brother had made arrangements beforehand. Although my brother was the head of law firm, he had entrusted the management of the office to a reliable person. So it seems that the law firm can continue as a corporation. Many people attended his funeral, and so many wreaths were brought to the venue that it overflowed, and I was once again reminded of his greatness. My sons also helped with the funeral, and in particular, my second son regretted not being adopted when he saw big company presidents and politicians attending the funeral. I didn't know Uncle was such a great man. I should have been adopted. My eldest son was dumbfounded at his brother's reaction, but my husband and I kind of understood why he regretted it. I was the chief mourner, but no one seemed to mind the absence of my sister-in-law, and no one pointed it out. I was wondering if there was anyone other than us knew that my brother was married. Since my brother and sister-in-law only went on a honeymoon without having a wedding ceremony, even relatives might not have noticed. I couldn't help but wonder if my brother should have gotten married, if it was going to end up like this. Thinking about how my brother's estate would be taken away by a wife who didn't show her face at the funeral, I regretted not adopting my second son. Thanks to the help of the people from the law firm, we were able to finish my brother's funeral smoothly, so afterwards, we gathered everyone at my brother's house and had a dinner. Thanks to everyone's help, I believe my brother can rest in peace. Thank you for your cooperation. Just as my family and the people from the law firm were getting somber, my sister-in-law arrived, dressed in the flashy patent coat. I spoke to her, who appeared as if she had timed her arrival for the end of the funeral. "What are you doing here now? Do you need something from us?" Then she said with a loud voice that everyone can hear, "As I am his wife, I would inherit $80 million in his house. Since we don't have any kids, everything belongs to me." She spoke in a triumphant tone, but when the colleagues from my brother's law firm heard it, they looked at each other and then burst into laughter. We didn't know why they were laughing and looked at them in wonder. She started yelling at them with a fierce face. "How rude! Is there something funny?" One of the lawyers replied with a smirk. "Well, you two are already divorced, aren't you?" We assumed that the divorce was finalized the day before he collapsed. I couldn't help but shout at the shocking fact I just found out. "Did you two get divorced?" I hurriedly looked at her, who was glaring at the lawyer, who just informed us of the truth with an even scarier expression than before. A different lawyer spoke to her, who was silently gritting her teeth. "The cause of your divorce was your affair, right? We all know that you were asked to pay damages as soon as the divorce was finalized." Then she yelled at the lawyer, who said this while glaring at him even more intensely. "Damages? I don't need to pay them anymore since the person I was supposed to pay is no longer here, right?" She said this mockingly, but she had no chance against these legal experts. "No, the right to claim damages has been inherited by your sister-in-law, so you still have a duty to pay." Only then I finally realized that I was my brother's sole heir. Since my parents were not around, I should be the only one left if my brother divorced her. She had just realized this fact and glared at me with a terrifying face, causing me to instinctively step back. Despite her disbelief, she started yelling at the lawyers again. "Since we were divorced, I should receive half of the inheritance in the property settlement, right?" The lawyer retorted to her with a fed-up expression. "First of all, this house was purchased before your marriage, so it's not subject to property division. Also, when your divorce was finalized, you received money from your ex-husband, right? We even have the receipt." I felt good to see my sister-in-law being defeated by the lawyers. Although she was frustrated, she seemed to have remembered something, and suddenly smiled as she shouted, "Right, there's life insurance. I should be the beneficiary." I couldn't help but be impressed by her, who was still able to think calmly in this situation. She confidently spoke about how she had made herself the beneficiary of the life insurance when they got married. However, the lawyer quickly denied this as well. Most likely, the beneficiary was changed when the divorce was finalized. Your ex-husband was a very thorough person. Upon the lawyer's instruction, I retrieved the life insurance policy from my brother's belongings. Then my sister-in-law snatched the policy from me and checked the beneficiary. But soon her shoulders dropped in disappointment. When I retrieved the policy and to check it, my name was in the beneficiary section. She, who had decided there was nothing left for her to claim, finally started yelling out her true feelings. "This is a complete disaster. I only married him because he was a lawyer. But in the end, I only got a small amount of money. Plus, I have to pay damages." One of the lawyers retorted with a stern face. "Your ex-husband has regretted marriage too." He said that relying on a dating app in his haste to get married was his mistake. I had never heard about this from my brother, but it seemed he had honestly expressed his feelings to his colleagues. With no more retorts, she left with a dejected look. She proposed to pay the damages later, but as she was unemployed, she quickly began looking for work. However, since she had never worked seriously before, she quickly quit as soon as things got tough, and seemed to start looking for a wealthy partner at the dating app again to make money quickly. Before long, she found a wealthy man at the dating app and seemed to have deceived him into giving her money for wedding expenses. But the man quickly realized it and reported it to the police. We heard from a lawyer who was my brother's subordinate that my sister-in-law was arrested on suspicion of marriage fraud. To be precise, I went to the law firm to check why the damages from my sister-in-law to me hadn't been paid, and that's when I heard the news. He told me with an astonished face, "Given that your former sister-in-law has been arrested, it's likely that the payment of the damages will be impossible for a while." For me, the damages didn't matter. Just knowing that my disliked sister-in-law had suffered greatly, I was satisfied. I hope the police thoroughly investigate any other crimes and that she is given a severe punishment, and I'm sure my brother would want the same. On the other hand, I had unexpectedly inherited my brother's estate. Therefore, our family moved into his house. We had been renting until now, so my husband and sons were very happy about this. Even though we seemed to be carrying on my brother's legacy as a whole family, my eldest son began studying harder than ever to become a lawyer. It seems that he'd admired the lawyers at my brother's law firm even more after seeing them defeat my sister-in-law. While he couldn't be adopted, I hope that my eldest son can inherit my brother's will and become a great lawyer. On the other hand, my second son seemed to be resentful and upset that I had inherited all of my brother's estate. If things were right, I, who would have been adopted my uncle, could have inherited everything. I couldn't help but smile at my second son's half-joking demeanor.